I had been eyeballing the Daniel Smith dot card packs for quite a while now, and so I finally decided to pick some up. It's actually been a while since I originally bought these and swatched them, but I've been holding on to the footage to make a video, so here we are now. So I actually ended up picking the largest pack of the dot cards. This is the 238 pack of them, and pretty much what the dot cards are is just a tiny little dot of dried watercolor on watercolor paper, and the main purpose of these is so you're able to try out the different colors, kind of pick and choose what you want. The main reason I got these in particular was to be able to swatch all the colors and see them in person, so eventually I could be able to buy tubes of the colors that I wanted to get. So this is a really nice tool, especially with Daniel Smith themselves having so many different watercolor colors. It's kind of overwhelming to go online if you're looking to get like a certain red or something. It's just really nice, especially if you're not super familiar with pigment information. And even when it comes to pigment information, some pigments can be used in different ways that they look totally different. So as a whole, this was just very nice to be able to see what the colors looked like. I did end up purchasing this guy off of Amazon. I know they sell it off of Dick Blick. I think it might be cheaper on Dick Blick, but just for shipping purposes, it made more sense to get it off of Amazon. The 238 dot card was around, I think, $22 US dollars, so it is a little bit expensive considering it's just tiny little dots of watercolor with the intention of swatching, but it's a really convenient tool. And honestly, these paints, there's so much paint here. Watercolor a little bit goes a long way, so when it comes to the dot cards, it's like, yes, the intention is to be used with swatching, but you could very easily use these to actually make paintings with if you really wanted to, especially if you're not familiar with professional watercolors. This is a nice tool to kind of dip your toes in without having to spend a ton of money, and this way you get to try a bunch of different pigments, a bunch of different colors. I think this is actually almost all, if not their entire selection of Daniel Smith watercolors. I know there's some weird ones in here. There's like these genuine ones that are made with genuine like pigments and like rocks. I don't know. I should probably look at it and read it, but there's some in here that are a lot different than the regular paints. And I feel like while the swatch cards are a really good idea and they're really nice and handy to have, some of the paints that are on here are kind of a bust for them because some of these paints activated really easy, but when it came to all the ones that were like sparkly and stuff, generally watercolors that have sparkles in them, like any kind of metallic paints, they tend to take a lot of working to activate to the point where you can lay them down with the pigment actually showing. So when it came to the sparkly ones, it was just kind of, you had to rub the paper a lot, and while it is watercolor paper, it can't stand being rubbed as much as you need to, so it would just kind of pill the paper, and you didn't really get to see the true nature of these paints because of that. I mean, this is kind of the best method of showing you the paints, but it just really didn't show off any of the metallic paints at all. However, you definitely could see the sparkles on there. You just didn't get a chance to really lift off a lot of color without completely ripping up the paper. So there was a certain point where I had to be like, okay, I can't do this anymore, I have to stop. And you could definitely see while I was swatching, some of the paints themselves, they just didn't want to activate as fast, which again, it's not really an issue for the paints, because the ones that activated really fast were great, but some of them did need a little bit extra working, and it just kind of was a sacrifice of the paper. But as a whole, you can see these are such pretty colors. This actually took me probably an hour and a half to do all the swatches for. It took a lot longer than I thought it would, but it was a lot of fun to see how all these colors look. And like I said, this is so immensely helpful because, like, especially when it comes to yellows and stuff, and like ordering them off of like Dick Blick, for example, they all look the same and it's really hard to kind of pick what you need. So having this has been super helpful for me to be able to pick out what colors that I could use for my own palette. So I'm really glad I was able to buy this. I hope if you're interested in some of these colors, maybe this footage will help you kind of see what the actual colors look like. I know because I did water them down for half of the swatch, it's not the most pigmented swatches, so I apologize for that because I noticed that after the fact. After I did them, I was like, oh, the way I swatched them, you can't really see the most of the actual colors because I did water them down for like half the swatch, but as a whole, these swatch cards were a lot of fun to do and they're very pretty. And like I mentioned previously, this set does come with a lot of paint, so I did decide to do a individual speed paint to go along with the swatches, just so there was more to go with this video, and I did kind of want to see how much you could use these paints before they actually disappeared. So obviously I did the original swatches that I used the paints for, and on top of that, a little while later, I actually decided to go back and swatch them again onto Canson XL watercolor paper. I think it was the watercolor paper that I swatched them on, but I did end up swatching these paints twice. I didn't actually show my second set of swatches in this video because I wasn't even thinking about it when I was recording, and there's the main swatches to begin with, so it's not super important. But I did swatch them a second time, and there was still a decent amount of paint left. There were a couple of the little dots that came with like no paint in them. It was really funny. There was a couple that were just like the tiniest amount of paint. So for those ones, it's like those won't go very far. But for the most part, they were a decent amount of paint on there that you can definitely use these quite a few times. Obviously, you're gonna go through some colors more than others, but there's so many similar shades in here too that it's like if you really wanted to, you could really utilize this set and paint off of it. I know that's not the intention, but there is a lot of paint on there, so you're absolutely able to do that. So for this drawing, I decided to paint my original character, Wendy. I don't like her name. I've had her as a character since I was like 12 probably, so I want to give her another name, but I keep going back and forth, and I'm not necessarily attached to Wendy, but I don't like change, so it's taking me a long time to rename her. But she's basically this little fox girl, and I really like her design. I kind of played around with her design lately and changed it up a little bit because I don't draw my characters very often, and when I do, I definitely don't go about changing their original designs very much. I know some people do that all the time where they're constantly changing their characters, but I don't make new characters often, and with my old ones, I'm just, like I said, I don't like change, so I normally keep them in the same outfits, the same hairdos, etc. But I played with Wendy a little bit, and I really like what I ended up doing with her. I like her a lot. Her design is really simple, all things considered, but it's cute. And it was a lot of fun to use these paints, actually. I recently got this little porcelain palette from my boyfriend for Christmas, and I love it so much. This was my first time using it, and it came in handy because plastic ones are nice and all, but having a porcelain one was so nice. I've been wanting one for a really long time, and I don't know why I actually didn't pick one up for myself because it's not like they're really expensive or anything, but I just didn't get around to buying it myself. So I have this one that I got for Christmas, and it was so nice to use with this drawing. So much more fun than the plastic one, so I really like that. And in doing this drawing, it really did reinforce the concept of like, I'm fairly messy and impatient when it comes to doing watercolor paintings. Normally in my paintings, in my opinion at least, I feel like I don't do anything too detailed or anything, I don't know. I'm very simple when it comes to my watercolor paintings. I know they're not the like least detailed paintings out there, but I'm like really impatient and I'm really messy when I'm doing watercolor paintings. I don't wait for things to dry and I just put things next to each other, and thankfully these watercolors do lift. They're not the easiest to lift, but they do lift if you work with them for a while, and if you're using any kind of paper that can handle lifting, like this is just the Canson watercolor paper, and it did absolutely fine for a while. There was a certain part where it was like, please stop doing this to me, but as a whole these paints lifted really well, which is very, very nice because there were a lot of spots where I just didn't wait for things to dry, and then I put a dark color next to them and it was like, oopsies, I made a mistake. But yeah, I'm really impatient when it comes to watercolor paintings, especially when I'm painting skin. I know I need to layer things, but I don't want to wait for layers to dry. So that is absolutely my downfall. Luckily, there was a point in time where I had to walk away from this painting to do something, so that was nice because it was able to completely dry. But I don't know about you guys, I'm just really impatient when it comes to painting. That's the nice thing about watercolor, at least, is it does dry fairly quickly. And all things considered, I could just like bring over a hairdryer and do that, but I'm also too lazy to do that, even though it would be in my benefit and make things dry. I don't know, it's a chaotic method when I'm going in with painting. I also try to style a little bit different from what I normally do. I had a lot of fun with it, especially with the eyes, and I really like how this guy ended up turning out. The only thing I don't like about this painting is the background color I ended up choosing. I felt like it was really plain, so I wanted to do some kind of background color, and I mean, I don't know. What I ended up doing with it, it's not horrible, but then I ended up adding some gold paints of my own, and I don't know. It's not my favorite, but I still like how it came out as a whole. I really enjoyed painting the skin on there. I spent a lot of time painting the skin, and I did a lot of layers on there, even though, like I said, I was really impatient with it. But I had a lot of fun using these little dot card paints. I definitely think it's a good purchase if you're looking to expand a palette or create a palette just so you can actually see what the colors look like, because it is really hard when you're just going off of the internet, because like I purchased my two paints from Dick Blick, and Dick Blick doesn't always have the correct color, and you can look them up online, but it doesn't mean that's what they're going to look like in person anyways, so it was just really nice to be able to get your hands on something that was the actual paints and see what they actually look like in real life. So I hope my swatches might help you decide. I know sometimes it's difficult because, like I said, when you're looking at them off of a computer screen and someone recorded it, they might not look the same as they do in person, but as a whole, I hope this was informative. If you guys didn't know the dot cards were things that existed, I think they're very, very beneficial. I wish other brands did the dot cards because I think, like I said, they're really nice to be able to see the different paints. I wish like M-Gram did them because I honestly think I like M-Gram paints more than I like Daniel Smith's, but that's just my own personal preference. I am very grateful that Daniel Smith does these. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.